So friends, in seventh lecture of this series, you are all welcomed. I hope you are not lost your rhythm and enthusiasm of learning relativistic quantum mechanics. So I welcome you again with full zeal and enthusiasm. In the seventh lecture, what we will do first is, as we have derived the Dirac equation last time, this time we try to understand the properties of these Dirac matrices, alpha and beta. Because we know in quantum mechanics, those operators, the matrices, are in fact the deciding one. Operators actually decides the form and the mathematics of the wave function or the state function. So we try to derive first the characteristics of this alpha and beta, the Dirac matrices, and as an outcome of this characteristics, we will be in a position to understand the kind of state function or the wave function describing your relativistic free particle that we can understand. So what kind of state functions we will see that we will call it as a Dirac spinors. So what are the properties of this Dirac spinors can be understood in reference to the characteristics of this Dirac matrices. So I welcome you to understand the properties of Dirac matrices in this lecture, and then we can proceed to apply this in the next lecture, how they can be useful in deriving the relativistic Dirac equation. So welcome you. So welcome back friends. This is our probably the seventh uh, lecture in series while discussing the relativistic quantum mechanics. So let's start further. But before we go to the next part today, uh, let us recollect what we did last time. I think at the end of that last lecture or the last part, we could derive the expression for the energy of a free particle based on the concepts of Dirac. And the brilliant idea of converting your second order differential equation into the first order, Dirac has introduced this alphas and beta. By name, this alpha and beta, they are in the matrix form and they are known as the Dirac matrices. At the end, we have also considered the properties of this Dirac matrices. First, that their eigenvalues are always plus or minus 1, and they are basically forming the linearly independent, they are the linearly independent matrices, but having the constant eigenvalues. At the same time, we have also considered that in order to cancel out that cross term, like alpha x, alpha y, and alpha y, alpha x, this matrices, Dirac matrices, should follow the anti-commutation rule. So this is also we have observed that this alpha x, alpha y should anti-commute. Not only alpha x, alpha y, all other components of alpha and even beta with alpha, they are following anti-commutator rule. And at our disposal, such matrices are already there, like Pauli's spin matrices. So we know that the Pauli spin matrices follow this Clifford algebra. They follow this anti-commutation rule, and they are constant matrices. Here, the constant meaning is that they do not depend on the coordinates of the system, like space coordinate or the time coordinate. Correct? So they are made up of only numbers. So such Pauli spin matrices are at our hand, and today, I think what we will first discuss the properties of this Dirac matrices, and once we are identified the required properties, then we try to construct the Dirac matrices in terms of Pauli spin matrices. So I think today's talk is about the properties and the constructions of the Dirac matrices. So I start with that. We are today interested in finding the properties and how this Dirac matrices can be constructed in terms of Pauli's spin matrices. So that's the thing we are starting with. And for that, let me write again the expression of the Dirac free energy, Dirac equation for a free particle, relativistic free particle. Alpha E can be written as plus or minus C this alpha dot P plus beta M0 C. Correct? So this is your energy expression for the Dirac particle moving freely with a speed which is very high, relativistically high speed. And correspondingly, we can also write the operator, the Hamiltonian operator, that can be written like this: alpha dot P plus beta m0 c square. Uh, now, we first observe here that this is for the free particle. And for a free particle, the Hamiltonian is always self-adjoint. It is Hermitian. So this Hamiltonian operator is always self-adjoint operator. Correct? And in order to have your Hamiltonian to be Hermitian, it also demands your alpha and beta should also be Hermitian. So this first observation from the Dirac Hamiltonian, this we call as the Dirac Hamiltonian. Then this Hamiltonian for a free particle being Hermitian, alpha and beta should also be Hermitian. So very first observation or the very first property that we can deduce simply by observing this or requiring your Hamiltonian to be Hermitian, that your alphas and beta, they should be Hermitian. Meaning that alpha I is equal to your alpha I Dagger. And similarly, your beta should be beta Dagger. Don't forget, this alphas and betas are in the matrix form. They are the Dirac matrices. And in the case of matrix, Hermitian means you have to do two things. Self-adjoint means you should do two things. Step number one, you have to find the adjoint. And once you find the adjoint, then we replace your components by its complex conjugate. So the elements are now replaced by their complex conjugate. In order to have your alpha and alpha Dagger to be same, it demands that alpha and beta both should be a square matrix. Otherwise, when you find the adjoint, when you are just replacing the rows and columns or interchanging rows and columns, if they are not of the same order, then you will not get the same matrix back. And therefore, this Hermitian property automatically demands that the number of rows and number of columns in this alpha and beta must be same. In the language of matrix, I can say it must be a square matrix. So another property that we deduce simply by observing or requiring your Hamiltonian to be Hermitian for a free particle, that your alpha and beta are Hermitian, meaning they must be a square matrix. So number of rows and number of columns are same. Okay? So this is the another meaning, that number of rows and columns are same. Going further, we have already identified that eigenvalues of these alphas and betas are plus or minus 1. So third property, which already we have studied, that your alpha I and beta have eigenvalues plus or minus 1. That means we are looking for a square matrix whose eigenvalues are either plus or minus 1. So it is basically the combination of such numbers so that eigenvalues come same. Why I said numbers? Because I also know that this alpha and beta are basically the constant matrices. Being constant means they do not depend on space part or even time part. And therefore, it is ultimately the numbers which we will arrange in the form of an array or in the form of a matrix whose eigenvalues will be plus or minus 1. So, since we are deriving first the properties of Dirac matrices, so we can start looking at the behavior of the Hamiltonian for a free particle being a Hermitian. Alpha, beta should also be Hermitian. That also implies that it must be a square matrix having the same number of rows and columns. Their eigenvalues we have already discussed in the previous part has unity, and therefore this constant matrices which do not depend on the space part and time part are basically the numbers, and those numbers have eigenvalues 1 or -1. Going further and applying the another property that eigenvalues are 1, and second property that we have obtained that the squares are always 1. Right? So using this property, now we go and try to find further important properties for this Pauli's this Dirac matrices. Right? So let's go to the next page where we try to find one more property. Let me write, say I have a x component of alpha x, and if I multiply it by 1, that is already there, then I can write the same thing as alpha x beta square. Don't forget, as I just mentioned, this beta square is a unity, and beta square, don't forget, this is the matrix, it's the operator. So basically it is your alpha x beta dagger beta, something like psi star psi type of thing, correct? And we know that these alphas and betas, they follow the anti-commutation rule. So if I write here again, the anti-commutation rule between any component, alpha I and alpha j, they anti-commute. So it is alpha x, alpha y plus alpha y, alpha x, that is 0. And it is not only between alphas, components of alpha, even between alpha and beta. So this anti-commutation is the property that we can use again. For example, this part, if I consider alpha x, alpha beta dagger, you know the beta dagger itself is beta because it's a Hermitian. Then if I use the anti-commutation property, it can be written as beta alpha x. And don't forget, you already have one beta here. Right? So what I can say that alpha x can also be written like this. In the language of mechanics, you can also say that this is some kind of transformation. You transform your alpha x to alpha x by sandwiching it between beta dagger and beta, provided this beta dagger and beta are the unitary operators. So basically this is the transformation, but right now I don't go in that direction. I leave it to you whether this beta and beta dagger are unitary or not, that you can check. But it is like a transformation going from alpha x to alpha x. And then this is a matrix. So obviously if I just make a sum of all the diagonal elements, which we know as a trace, then we can find the trace of this alpha x matrix. Basically this is a trace, sum of all diagonal elements. Then instead of alpha x, I can use this also because they are equivalent. So this simple mathematics actually proves very interesting thing. Again, you can write a minus common. This is all very simple thing. No need to prove, in fact. Just for completeness, I am writing. And you know that beta dagger alpha x beta can also be written as a alpha x, correct? Because ultimately these are the same thing. So this I can write as alpha x. What I have proved, the trace of alpha x is equals to its negative value, and this is not possible with any other number except 0. Otherwise 1 is not equals to -1, 3 is not equals to -3, but only 0 and -0 are same. So what this property demands, that the trace of alpha x should be 0, and not only for alpha x, even for all other matrices, trace is 0. The sum of all diagonal elements are always 0. So let me generalize it. Trace of any alpha is 0, so is the trace of beta. So another property that we have obtained is that the trace of this Dirac matrices is always 0. Along with the previous all the topics, that your alphas and betas should be a square matrix, number of rows and number of columns are same, their eigenvalues are always plus or minus 1, they are constant matrices, so basically it is the numbers which I will arrange in the form of an array. And the third property which we have just obtained, such that the trace are 0, that implies that this must be the even order matrices. So the number of rows and number of columns are either 2, 4, 6, 8, not odd numbers. So this trace should be 0. They are square matrix and their eigenvalues are plus or minus 1. So basically what we can prove from all this discussion that this must be your either 2 cross 2 matrix, so or 4 cross 4 matrix, or 6 cross 6 matrix, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we can now say that this type of matrice can be used to construct your Dirac matrices. And as I just said, we already have with us who follow all these properties, and they are known as the Pauli matrices. So this is already known to us that Pauli's matrices are following all these properties. So just to remind you, which we had written as a sigma x, the x component of it, which if you remember is something like this. It's a y component, sigma y, which we have written 0 minus I 0, and its zth component we can write like 1 0 0 minus 1. Again, you can see they are all constant matrices. There is no space dependence or say the time dependence. Their trace is 0 because 0 plus 0, 0, 0 plus 0, 0, 1 plus minus 1, that is 0. Correct? So they are all, and of course they are the even matrices because this is the 2 cross 2 matrices. And of course, even you can also find sigma x square, that is 1, sigma y square is 1, sigma z square is 1. So it and eigenvalues are also plus or minus 1. So all these matrices, Pauli matrices, follow all our requirement. And then they are also following the anti-commutation rule. Sigma x, sigma y follows sigma y, sigma x, and likewise for all other components. So they are already with us, and therefore at a first glance we think that we can construct our Dirac matrices alpha and beta in terms of Pauli matrices. But this 2 cross 2 representation of Dirac matrices in terms of Pauli's matrices puts a question how one can find beta. This 2 cross 2 representation does not allow you to construct any beta who follows all these 7 properties. Okay? So this is not possible to form. But we know in the Dirac theory we need 4 matrices, alpha, 3 alpha, and beta. So this 4th component we are unable to construct. And therefore, instead of going for the 2 cross 2 matrix representation for our Dirac matrices, let's go to the next representation, and that is your 4 cross 4 representation. So now we are going to the Dirac matrices in terms of the Pauli's matrices. This is known as the Pauli-Dirac representation. Okay, this Pauli Dirac representation means we are writing now Dirac matrices, which is now 4 cross 4, the next higher order, because 2 cross 2 cannot give you the 4th matrix beta, and therefore we go to the 4 cross 4. If someone likes to go even for the higher order, instead of 4 cross 4, let's say 8 cross 8, you can. So it's not the only one way to represent your Dirac matrices, but this is the lowest possible order in which we can construct our this alpha and beta. So in that way, now I am writing the alpha x. It will look like, because it's a 4 cross 4, so obviously it is a 4 cross 4, and that can be constructed like this. Okay? So I'm writing now alpha x. Similarly, we can construct even alpha y and alpha z. You can see this is all, again, trace is 0, 0 plus 0 plus 0, all diagonal elements are 0, correct? It's if you multiply it by its Dagger, in fact it's a self-adjoint, so alpha x multiplies by itself, then you will find that its eigenvalues will be 1, so alpha x square will be 1. All the properties which we have done that you can prove in fact. But if you just look at the symmetry of this matrix which Dirac has constructed, if I divide this into the 4 part, you can see this each quadrant can be considered something like this. This quadrant, the first quadrant, you can see here, it's like a 0, 1, 1, 0, and this 0, 1, 1, 0 is nothing but your sigma x, Pauli's matrix. So ultimately, what we say that this is basically like 0, sigma x, 0. But here 0 does not mean only 0, it is the 0 matrix. And it is also a 2 cross 2 matrix. So basically now we have used 4 2 cross 2 matrices and we have constructed in total this 4 cross 4 matrices. Correct? So this is your alpha x, Dirac alpha, and similarly you can construct y and z. I write it commonly. So 0 sigma y and z, sigma y and z, and of course 0. Correct? Where it means that this is a 0 matrices. Here, if you are considering y component, you should use sigma y. If you are considering z component, use sigma z. And that fourth matrix, which was not possible to construct for 2 cross 2, but now it can be constructed. So that also I write like that. It is the unit matrix. So instead of this, we can have now all the diagonal elements, their eigenvalue, they are 1 or minus 1. So how we have constructed that this in the third and fourth row and column, we have elements minus 1, whereas this. But again, you can see the sum of all these diagonal elements, trace is 0. Again, you can think this is divided into 4 part. Then this will be your unit matrix. This is 0 matrix, and this is also unit matrix, but if I can take minus common. So the same thing, beta, can also be written slightly in a different way. I can write this unit matrix as a 1 and this 0 matrix like this. So this is nothing but your unit matrix, correct, whose eigenvalues are 1. So all this are known as the Dirac matrices. So we are able to construct the Dirac matrices in terms of Pauli matrices. And since they follow all the properties, it is a very simple exercise that anyone who likes to prove, for example, in 1 mark question, if it is asked that prove that alpha trace of alpha x is 0, you can use it and you can prove that alpha x square is 1. You can use this and multiply by itself and prove that it is 1. All those properties of this Dirac matrices which we have just discussed, that can be used to prove that, correct? We further note that it's not, as I've already said, that it's not just the 4 cross 4 matrix. Even you can go for the higher representation. But in the lowest presentation, it is this. I go back to my first slide for today's topic. If you just remember that the Hamiltonian, the Dirac Hamiltonian which we have written, was written like this. And again, we know that if alpha is your 4 cross 4 matrix, so as the beta, then depending on this operator, we can have the properties of the eigenvalue, eigenfunction. So eigenfunction and eigenvalues are the characteristics of the operator. Since your operator is a 4 cross 4 matrix, then obviously the eigenfunction will also have the 4 components. So this 4 cross 4 lowest order presentation of the Dirac matrices demands that your state function or the wave function needed to define a state of a particle, that function psi rt should also have 4 components, correct? This 4 components, something like if we have a position vector or any ordinary Euclidean vector, let's say any vector p, then it has a 3 component, px, py, pz. And you know that this vector can also be written in its column vector form. So this is nothing but your Euclidean vector. Same way, if psi has a 4 component, if I denote them like this, psi1, and of course RT, or combinedly you can write this also. It has 4 components, so let me write all of them separately. Psi3, the third component, and of course the psi4, this. So this more than one component quantity, if we call as a vector, then this is also a vector having 4 components. So for me it is the 4 vector. But this 4 vector is not what we have discussed in the case of the first topic of relativity under Minkowski space, correct? Because of the property which we will be discussed. But here also we just in the beginning, let's just find out that this state function is a vector. If you remember, at the end of the KG equation, I have mentioned that in order to obey the Lorentz invariance property, the state function describing the KG particle should always be a scalar quantity. Then and then, under the relativistic Lorentz transformation, your KG equation remains invariant. So that invariance property has demanded that the state function should be scalar quantity. Against that, here the mathematics suggests that since your Pauli matrices are a 4 cross 4 matrices, so it has correspondingly the 4 components to represent your state function, and therefore what we prove that your state function describing your Dirac particle, relativistic Dirac particle, should be in the vector form. In fact, if it is in the vector form, then and then this your equation, the Dirac equation which we have written, if I write it fully, then my Dirac equation, let me write it again. So E I write as IH cut del by del T. Now I write with this notation. Don't forget, this is the notation Dirac has used as a Bray and cat notation. So this is your cat psi. But this cat psi has now not 3 components like this, but it is your 4 component. This we can write like this, and of course we have now on other side it will be your P, which I can write as a minus IH cut nebula, but C is also there. So what I'm writing, alpha dot nebula, it operates on this side. Sorry for this clumsy notations. And then of course B beta m0 C square and this psi again. Correct? So this equation is invariant under the Lorentz transformation only when your state function is a vector. Correct? So this Lorentz invariance property is now demanding here that your state function should be a vector. By name, this are known as Dirac spinors. I'm not sure about how this name comes, but I believe that since Dirac has represented their matrices in terms of Pauli spin matrices, so this spin and Dirac word is mixed to produce maybe this name Dirac spinors, but I'm of course not sure. But before we conclude this session, I think let me must make one comment, that is that caution that we must consider, that this psi RT, which we have considered made up of 4 component, does not transform like 4 vector of the Minkowski space. So we can't say that this is the 4 vector which we have defined in the very beginning while discussing the concept of relativity within the Minkowski space. No, this is different than that. So this is not behaving like a 4 vector of your Minkowski space, but this is something different, though it has the 4 component. It is demanded by the Lorentz invariance property of this Dirac equation that it should be having the 4 component. So this is how we can construct the Dirac matrices, and using the properties of this Dirac matrices, once they are already constructed, we'll try to find first, I think in the next part, we'll try to go and try to find what is the covariant form of the Dirac equation. We'll see that how simply the Dirac equation can be converted into covariant form, and along with that, we also try to find out the probability density for this. Just to remind you again, the KG equation has a one difficulty, conceptual difficulty, that in the case of KG equation, the probability was coming positive and negative both. So this negative probability was in fact due to the second order space and time differentiation. Realizing that fact only, the Dirac had derived everything in terms of the first order. You can see here the first order time differentiation, and this is also the first order space differentiation. So now we have to check whether the probability is coming always positive as demanded or as required or not. So in the next part, as I've said, we take it into 2 parts. First, we write this Dirac equation in the covariant form, number 1, and number 2, we will check how the probability density behaves in this case, whether it remains positive only as required or not. So I'll stop here for this part, and in the next part we go with these 2 topics, covariant form and the probability density. So you have realized that the Dirac matrices are basically the 4 cross 4 matrices. Alpha and beta both have a 4 cross 4 they are matrices, and the wave function or the state function describing such a particle should also be having a 4 component. So the state function psi will now have a 4 components, and we have realized that in order to preserve the Lorentz invariance property, it has to be so that psi, the state function, should be a 4 component. But at the end, we have also noted down that even if it is a 4 cross 4 components vector, but it is not like a 4 vector of your Minkowski space, correct? So that is a clear difference that we should realize and we should keep in mind, that even if it is having the 4 component, but it is not like a 4 vector of your relativistic orthogonal Minkowski space. Having noted the properties of Dirac matrices and the state functions of having the 4 component, it is quite obvious to extend this further in the next lecture, in fact, that we can derive the Dirac equation. And based on that Dirac equation, we can proceed further to get the physics. So friends, I hope you have enjoyed this lecture, and no need to say again and again, but we do need your response, because this everything we have prepared at the homemade devices and the homemade arrangement. So if any loopholes are there, or you feel that this can be improved further, so such suggestions are always welcome. So don't hesitate to put your remark or say comment on this. So welcome you for the next lecture. Thank you.